Hello, hello, everyone,
Ooh, hello.
and hello to you too.
Hello. Hello. Yes, hello.
We've got everyone. We've got you, and we've got me.
That's everyone.
That's everyone, technically, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Right, hang on. I've got to do a few things here as well to get us up properly.
It's beautiful. Should I start chatting to the
Yes,
five
if you just
glorious viewers that we have?
start. It usually takes people a while to show up, so hopefully there'll be more than five. Right, there we
Yes.
go.
All right, folks. Welcome to the weekly Day One Careers Super Show, where we answer all your questions about behavioral interviews at Amazon. So you're in our channel. This is Day One Career. So you probably know Gigi. You might know me as well. Hello. But essentially, we are the co-founders of Day One Careers. We run the business, we run the channel, and we run the blog, the website. Uh, we run all the paid services and free services that help you prepare for your Amazon interview. But mostly, both Gigi and I, we used to be hiring managers. We used to be interviewers, and we both came to the realization that actually coaching people on behavioral interview skills with Amazon is a good idea. So I'll tell you my story, and then Gigi will tell you your story.
Okay.
Um, Gigi will tell you her story. So my story is goes like this. So I used to be a category leader and a senior marketer at Amazon, and at some point in time, I what I realized is that there were plenty of folks who I was interviewing for my roles, for other people's roles, who had really good CVs, resumes, and functionally they seemed to be a great fit. But when you put them in a situation of a behavioral interview, they absolutely bombed because they were not prepared. So, and the typical thing is as with all job interviews, if you bomb a job interview, you don't move across the stages. So I decided to, in my last 2 months at Amazon, decided to trial something. So rather than dinging someone during the first phone screen, I would give them a little bit of coaching, which was completely off the process. But you know, I was a very kind-hearted individual, and I just wanted to see what would happen if instead of rejecting someone at phone screen one, I would give them a little bit of coaching and then progress them to the phone screen two to see how they do with the next interviewer. And lo and behold, what I found, although a little bit of anecdotally, but I think it makes sense, right? If you give people some coaching on skills and people are willing to learn and willing to absorb the coaching, they tend to do better. And so from that idea, what was born is first I started coaching people on behavioral interviews at Amazon. Then I've created courses. And then one of the candidates who I worked with, she said to me, "Oh, you should meet Gigi because she is amazing and you guys are the only credible people in this industry." And so I got in touch and we met. And then in a few months, decided to merge our businesses together. So there you go. That's my story. But Gigi, do you want to tell your side of the story?
I will tell my side of the story. Sorry, folks. Harsh was kind enough to point out that I am snacking. I apologize. You might see me frequently snacking on these sessions. It's just the time of day that I need to snack. And I don't get food in any earlier. So apologies if you're watching me snack. If you're interested, I'm having an oat cake with crunchy peanut butter and jam, which would be jelly, I think, in the US. I don't know about
Yum.
everywhere else. Anyway, strawberry jam at that. Okay, so my story goes I was a bar raiser when I was at Amazon. So I spent inordinate amounts of time interviewing people and running debriefs. And in the course of that, over the years, I started to spot people just doing some weird things, quite honestly. And I don't really know how to describe weird things, but just weird things, but consistent weird things, which really caught my attention because it's one thing for individual people to do weird things, but it's another thing for lots of individual people who have nothing else in common to also do the same weird things. So that piqued my curiosity, and I started to ask people who had demonstrated these weird things where they had discovered these weird things. I mean, obviously, I didn't tell them I thought they were weird, just so that we're clear, but I did start to ask, what what inspired you to make that particular strategic choice in this session? And they pointed me towards a couple of YouTube channels, basically. Now, at the time, there were a lot fewer YouTube channels about Amazon interviewing than there are now, but I went and had a look and essentially identified that people who were posting content on YouTube about Amazon interviews were either people who had never worked at Amazon before in their lives. Don't know where they were getting their info from, but some of it was not accurate. People who were Amazonians but were working in very particular teams, very focused on particular skills areas. And although their advice was not bad advice, it was not universal advice. And then there were a whole bunch of other people who had just been interviewed at Amazon once and suddenly they're the gospel on the whole process. So that annoyed me, if I'm honest with you. So I set up my own YouTube channel with the full support of Amazon at the time. Amazon Interview Whiz, it was called. And there I trundled along until um, I decided my time at Amazon was up and just figured I might see if I could turn this YouTube channel into something that might cover a couple of bills. And lo and behold, it did. I started up my business, the Amazon Interview Whiz, and then at this point, I bisect with the gorgeous Yevgeny, and you heard the rest of the story. So that's how I got into this crazy game of working with you all and supporting you all in your Amazon interview preparation. And many hundreds, if not thousands of hours later of content creation, and it's got to be thousands by now, um, here we are at today's session. So let me then talk you through how today's session is going to work. And whilst I'm doing that, please have a think about what questions you might like to ask us. We are here for up to an hour, but only so long as we have questions to answer. So how this works, and if you're a returner, you already know this, so maybe you can go and make a cup of tea or something whilst I give this spiel, but you just need to ask your questions in the little slot here on the right-hand side of the page. Hopefully it is on the right-hand side of the page for you all, or I suppose it's the left-hand side of the page, but the right-hand side from if you're sitting looking at your screen. Anyway, you just need to ask your questions there. A couple of parameters just to be aware of when you ask your questions. Parameter number one is, please don't ask us really generic questions. For example, hi Gigi, Evgeny, I have an interview tomorrow, any tips? Because clearly we have hundreds of hours of tips, maybe not hundreds of hours, but a lot of tips, and they're all on the YouTube channel, and we can't just give you all of those tips over this live. It would take us forever. So please don't ask us super generic questions. On the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately, Yevgeny and I cannot be functional subject matter experts on every single job family that exists across the entirety of Amazon. I think there are maybe around 5,000, 6,000 different job families across the entirety of Amazon. And unfortunately, we cannot be experts in every single one of them, and we cannot know what type of technical / functional questions you're going to be asked if you happen to be going into an interview for a what's our favorite one? A what do we call it?
It's a
Construction
pre-construction manager for fulfillment
fulfillment
centers.
centers. There you go. That's our favorite go-to one. We cannot predict that, along with anything that might be asked of legal or product or program management or electronic engineers or robotics engineers or marketing managers or PR managers or social media managers or anything in between. So anything in between those two extremes, and you've probably got a good chance that we will be able to answer that one for you. Final thing to say is there is a character limit on the box there where you put your question in. So if you're tapping away and you discover you have hit the character limit, just press the number 1 and fill in the next box. And if you still hit the character limiter there, press number 2 and then keep going until you have finished your entire question. And then we will be able to scroll through the questions and pick out your 1, 2, 3, 4. Because quite often what happens is people get in between you and it all becomes a little bit chaotic. So make sure you end it 1, 2, 3, 4, and we will be able to pick you out of the crowd, as they say. All right. So with that all said, I think that's all of the housekeeping. Oh, final thing. Silly me. Please do stay all the way up until the end. We have incredible freebies to give you. I am very confident that these are the best Amazon interview preparation freebies that exist out there. So please stay until the end and you can snaffle those for yourself. Right, should we get going then, Yevgeny? Do you want to take the first one and then that give me a chance to have a little bite of my cracker?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so the first one. Do, 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 do. I think the first question is really this one. So this one says, I am stuck with my teammate story, which I'm reading is a tell me about yourself. I'm gonna steal that acronym from you, by the way, because I think it's really cool. Yeah, I think that's it. It becomes a day one careers lingo right now, right, teammate? Right. So if I start with my story from childhood, it feels very vague. But if I don't use a story, it feels like I'm reading my resume to the interviewer. Any tips? Yeah. So Gigi and I coach how to tell teammate stories, maybe slightly differently. So I'll give you my version, and then if she feels like there's an alternative version to be had, she'll give you hers. But essentially, so the framework is for me that really when they're asking you, tell me about yourself, all they want to know is how has your experience to date prepared you to do well in the job that you're interviewing for. Really, what you need to do is you need to give them a short professional intro, like the kind of stuff that people put on top of their resumes, like a little paragraph. I'm sure you've seen the one that I'm talking about. So start with that, and then maybe pick out a few core requirements from the job description, like something that stands out. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a verbatim copy paste from the job description, but if you were a hiring manager and you were hiring for this role and you wrote this job description, like what are you looking for? Top 3 things, right? And so after you've given them your short professional intro, just go into selling your professional profile in as far as those top 3 requirements are concerned. Literally, just I know you guys are looking for someone who did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and as it happens in my role, such and such, I've done exactly what you're looking for and demonstrated such and such skills, and very importantly, achieved some results, some tangible results. Just do it 3 times. That's pretty much all that I would say you need to do. But I don't know, Gigi, do you have a different approach to teammate? You're on mute, I think.
I was, so you couldn't hear me chomping away on the crunchy peanut butter. I do have a slightly different take on it. And I think the important thing to state at the beginning is I don't believe that most interviewers ask that question with a very specific view of what they want to hear you say. Because yes, I agree with Evgeny completely that they want a sense of how your career history has prepared you to work in this role. But whether they mean functional skills or whether they mean leadership behaviors, I don't think they really know. So, my slightly different take on Yevgeny is I always try to say to people, you want to use your interview time as efficiently as possible, and reading or walking the interviewer through what's already written on your resume is essentially a waste of time because they should have read your resume. So what I kind of coach people to do is to try and add a little bit of color to what they've already got in their resume. So I with Yevgeny in terms of picking a couple of particular examples or projects from your career history that you really feel stand out for you. But in addition to that, my recommendation is to look at the job description and not only see what they're looking for from a technical / functional point of view, but also look for hints on the type of persona that they're looking for someone to be like, when they, the type of person they're imagining. So if the job description talks about someone who is great at working in teams and has to work cross-functionally, stop on a project where you've had to work cross-functionally, but give it a little bit of color in terms of maybe saying, in this project, I learned the importance of working with different teams. I really enjoyed the dynamic. I found it super interesting how the different people's priorities play out and the challenge associated with balancing those different priorities. So not only are you reflecting the fact that, yes, I have done the work that sets me up for this particular role, but you add a bit of color to it in terms of how you behaved as a professional and what you like and what you're passionate about. Because the one thing you don't want to do is have the first answer. Not that I'm suggesting your answer would be boring, Yevgeny, but what you don't want to do is have the first answer of your interview boring your interviewer to death. What you want is them to feel engaged and interested and connected with you at the start. So not massively different to Yevgeny, but I do just think people should put a little bit more color into it and inject some of their personality and persona into their answer, as well as the functional skills they're looking for.
There's one thing that I think, and see if you will agree with me on this one, where I kind of try to nudge the candidates to draw the line, and that is, at the end of the day, the conversational is what they are interested in is stuff that kind of underpins your professional profile, if that makes any sense. Because what I've seen from plenty of candidates and coaching clients is that when they ask them to tell me about yourself, they go into a philosophical tirade about their approach to accomplishments and achievements. It has nothing to do with the role whatsoever, nothing to do with the job description. So I always, including stories from childhood, where
Yeah, we don't need your childhood.
say that again.
Yeah, we don't need your childhood.
Well, that's the thing, right? So I guess your approach and my approach, where I'm finding a similarity, is that we're nudging candidates and our clients to kind of still sell something about themselves in as far as the role is concerned.
As far as the role is concerned, exactly. And there's the functional aspects of the role, and then there's also the leadership behavior aspects of the role. So a role might require someone who has got experience in, I don't know, pay per click. I'm just making stuff up now, right? In managing Google Ads and social media campaigns. So yes, you would definitely talk about that. But whilst you're talking about a particular project that demonstrates you've got skills in PPC, Google Ads, etc., you could also inject something into that in terms of maybe if they're looking in the job description for someone who is highly detail orientated. You could embellish that narrative with the thing I love about PPC is you so have to be into the detail. It's like about the minutest bit of detail that could make all of the difference. And I've really learned through that project the importance of being super, super focused on the detail. So you're combining leadership behaviors as described by the job description and the technical requirements / functional requirements as described by the job description and smashing them together in your career history.
Cool. Excellent. Agreed.
All right. Shall I with you. I love the team A. We're so doing team A. Right. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, we do this one. Alana. Hello, Alana. Looking very cool in your sunglasses there. I do love a pair of sunnies. I am interviewing for a product marketing manager role. Okay. Any tips on remembering all of the data off the top of your head in the in-person loop? Okay, so Alana, are you telling me that you are physically going to be in a room with someone? Because although we have the on-site, most on-sites are now virtual, but I'm feeling that we must be now veering back towards in-person with the 5-day RTO. So, I don't, well, first of all, practice, clearly. If you try practice, and make sure you know the data points associated with your stories as best you can. But there's nothing wrong with having physical notes with you in an in-person loop. Um, Obviously, I did a lot of in-person loops because I was there before the whole COVID and virtual thing was happening. So very often candidates would just bring in notebooks and they would just say, I just want to double check the results, make sure I give you the right data. And they'd look in their notebooks, check the metrics, and then tell me the metrics. There's nothing wrong with that. Interview is not a memory test. And given how much data Amazon would want to hear and the specificity that they want to hear, you can't be expected to remember. I don't know, if you've got 20 stories, each story may have 2 or 3 data points. Okay, that's like 60 data points up to. No one's going to expect you to remember that. So have a notebook handy. Clearly make sure your notebook is very well structured and you can easily find the data point that you want, because there is nothing worse than sitting in front of someone whilst they're flipping through pages, desperately trying to find the data point that they're looking for. But as long as you're well organized and you can find the data point easily enough, there's nothing wrong with having a little notebook in front of you. Would you say any other tips, Evgeny?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, look, it's not a memory test at the end of the day. Have a notebook. Cool. All right. Here we nope. That one. Okay, cool. This one. Right. I'm going into my loop next week. I wanted some advice on how not to vomit at my interviewer when
Brilliant. That is
answering
the
LP
best
questions.
question anyone has ever asked us, Jeremy.
Yes. Should I allow them to lead me during the behavioral round? Right. I'm assuming by vomit, what you mean is to kind of overshare the details of the story.
I was imagining the other version of vomit.
But Jeremy, if I'm mistaken, please correct me. Correct me in the comments. Like, if anyone has any other ideas what Jeremy meant here, tell us in the comments to the video. Nah, I'm not gonna do this
Funny.
cheesy YouTube thing. Right. Anyway, so in terms of whether to lead or be led by the interviewer, look, in a sense, that's going to depend on the interviewer, because if the interviewer is the sort of interviewer that has a style where they lead candidates, you will very quickly realize that you are being led by the interviewer with various follow-ups and drill downs. But whether the interviewer is actually going to lead you in the right direction, that's quite questionable, because some interviewers will start following up as soon as you've shared something, and they follow their curiosity in the moment, but it doesn't mean that they will then help you get back on track with your story. So if you notice that the interviewer starts following up and drilling down right off the bat, just remember that it is your job to get yourself back on track, which means that you don't have to rely on how well the interviewer is taking care of helping you to interview well. That is typically what leading actually looks like, or being led. It's drill downs and follow-ups, and you'll see it. Some interviewers will do it, some interviewers won't do it. Now, in terms of, if you're asking me how to make sure that you don't overshare the details in case you get to tell your entire story from start to finish, which you might with some interviewers who will prefer you to just tell the whole thing and then they will ask you questions, then essentially think about putting some targets in terms of how long your story is. So that depends on the seniority of the role that you're applying to. But let's say if it's an L4 to L5 role, then I guess 4 to 5 minutes is probably okay. If it's L6 to L7, then 6 to 7 minutes. So something like this. The amount of details that you will share for your role should naturally kind of make your story slightly longer for more senior roles, purely because you're going to be sharing stories from roles that you have done that were more senior, and they have more complex problems that you were solving, and these require just more time to be explained. So 6 to 7 minutes for L6 to 7, and 4 to 5 minutes for L4 to 5. That is a good limit. If you stick within this limit, you are not quote unquote vomiting at your interviewer. Anything more than that, then you're probably a little bit oversharing. But again, remember, Amazon likes details. So I think kind of being biased on the side of sharing more than sharing less is probably a good idea. So I wouldn't worry about kind of oversharing details if you stick within those time limits. Any other pieces of wisdom, Gigi, to add to this one?
I'm just going to pick up something Jeremy says here, and I guess it ends up being just a philosophical conversation more than giving anyone actual direction, because there's no right answer to this, but I just thought it was worth chatting about. So Jeremy added an addendum saying, do I answer it in breaks and allow them room to follow up? So I know you spoke to this, but I want to talk about this specifically. So, folks, there are different ways stylistically of answering interview questions. Outside of the STAR model, which is kind of universal, stylistically, there are different ways of doing it. And as you trot your way around the internet, you will find that people tell you you should do this. And they tell you you should do this because it's their preference. So some people will tell you you should summarize your story in 2 minutes before you start going into the detail of the STAR model. Other people will tell you you should not speak for more than 1 minute before pausing and asking the interviewer if they have any follow-up questions for you. There will be lots of people that you're out there tell you this is the way to do it. This is not the way to do it. This is not the way to do it. But my point is, there's no right way of doing this, with the exception of the STAR model and with the exception of the things that you need to put into each of those different STAR sections. Stylistically speaking, there is only preference. So I loathe it when people keep stopping and asking me, do I want to ask them any follow-up questions? Because if I want to ask you follow-up questions, I'll just do it. I don't need you to stop. I don't need your permission. I find it very awkward. I would rather you just keep talking until I have a follow-up question, at which point I will ask that follow-up question. I also dislike it when people do a 2-minute introduction of their story before then telling me their story, because I find it super inefficient. You're just repeating something to me twice. I dislike it. But these are my preferences, and I am very much aware that other interviewers have other preferences. So you have to pick what you're most comfortable with. I, as a candidate, would hate to stop every minute or two in an interview to tell my story, because I'd get lost. I'd forget where I was in my story and I'd lose my flow and my mojo. You have to decide what way you think will enable you to do the best performance. And anybody that says stylistically there is only one way to do it is saying that because actually they don't have a broad range of experience and they think that there's only one way. Or I'm afraid they're rather egotistical and haven't recognized that just because it's their preference, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's everybody's preference. So that's my 2 pennies on that. Don't know, Yevgeny, if you've got anything extra to throw in that you have felt or noticed through the course of your interviewing and coaching.
No, it's literally what you said.
Fair enough.
And what I said, it's like,
And what you
you know,
said, exactly.
it's
So you
it's
said what I said.
complimentary, yeah.
All right. So should we just pick this? Oh no, sorry. I just wanted to go to something. Someone asked me how to navigate the YouTube channel, so I'm just going to pick that up. Adese, I hope I've got that right. I apologize if I have mispronounced that. So you are absolutely right. There is a ton of videos on the YouTube channel. I have tried to create playlists for you. So go check out the playlists and see if they work for you. I have one particular playlist that's called Start Here. So that is a very good place to start. But what I have also done, although I have to admit it might be a little bit out of date, so might not have all of the videos on it, is I created a channel navigator that you can download. It's a PDF and it just bunches everything up so that you can see everything that is available on the channel, and you can just click on the link and it will take you to that video. So I've put that in the chat there. If you want to download that, it's all free. You just need to sign up and you can access it on our platform and then download it. And then hopefully, although it doesn't give you a structure, you can see easily all of the content on the channel and then just pick things that you're interested in. Okay, sorry, Evgeny, I will go back and pick an actual question. Still going. There we go. This one. Yeah, that's kosher. I don't know where that comes from, but okay. Are there specific tips to how to mentally manage the 5 interviews during the loop? 2, do you need different stories examples for each interviewer? Okay, I'm going to start with 2 because there is a right answer there. And then I'm going to go back to 1 because how I would do it might be different to how Yevgeny would do it. So do you need different stories or examples for each interviewer? Yes, definitely. What you can expect is each interviewer will be assigned different leadership principles. So usually they are assigned 2 leadership principles each, although if you have a particularly technical role, that might drop down to 1 if they have to also ask you technical questions. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, 2 leadership principles each. And then they will probably be aiming to ask you somewhere between 2 and 4 questions for those 2 leadership principles. So worst case scenario, 2 questions per leadership principle. Best case scenario, depending on how you define worst and best, I suppose, 1 question per leadership principle. So everyone's going to have different leadership principles, and they're all going to ask you different questions. What you want to try and do is have different situations and stories for each of those interviewers. The reason why you want to do that is Amazon is looking for people who are consistently high performers. So they're looking for people who week in, week out, month in, month out produce really great work. So the more range of stories you have to share across all of your interviewers, the more impression you give that week in, week out, month in, month out, you are delivering high quality performance. If you keep sharing the same stories over and over with every interviewer, when they bring it all together in debrief and look at each other's notes, you're going to end up looking like you are perhaps a little bit of a one-trick pony, where you might have 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 good examples, but that's it. They're not looking for people who have moments of brilliance. They're looking for people who are consistent high performers, because that person then will reliably churn out high quality work. Now, that's a general principle. The more junior you are and the less experience you have, the more there is an appreciation that you may not be able to come up with a fresh situation for every single time you're asked a question, because you just haven't been in work for that long. So that's very much appreciated. But the more senior you get, the more career you have behind you, the higher organizationally you're operating, the more expectation there is that you should be able to produce unique situations and stories for every single question. Doesn't mean to say that you cannot ever repeat. That's not true. But the less you repeat, the better, because therefore the more high performant and consistent you appear. So that was your second question. First question, are there specific tips for how you mentally manage the 5 interviews during the loop? So I'm not sure what you mean by mentally manage them. So I assume you kind of mean just kind of cope with the enthusiasm and the pressure and the pace of it. I mean, I was always big in for chocolate. I would always have chocolate with me at any interview that I went to. I think it depends, really. I've got to be honest with you. I'm a bit weird. I like interviews. I'm a bit of a performer, if you hadn't noticed. So the opportunity to talk about moi for 5 hours is like, woo, heaven. So I'm not sure I find it particularly mentally draining. I actually always found it quite mentally engaging. But I'm going to pass on to Yevgeny now, because Yevgeny is a bit less extrovert than I am, and perhaps he might have some helpful tips for mentally managing the pressure of those 5 interviews.
Um, so I mean, the fact that, again, it really depends on who you are, and whether you actually like people and you like talking to people, because I'm not neither of those things. But I think so for me, the fact that, for example, there are, let's say, for an average L6 role, let's just assume 5 back-to-back interviews. I What kind of drives me and helps me survive mentally, and helped me survive mentally, is curiosity, right? So I think if you are curious enough to actually speak with these people, shake hands with these people, maybe ask them questions. If you're curious about Amazon and you've never met any Amazonians, then then you'll find the whole experience actually more interesting rather than stressful. The other thing that helps me quite a lot is if I don't care excessively much about getting this job, because if the job starts meaning the world to me, then immediately I go into this massive adrenaline bath from which I cannot get out. So it completely fogs my brain. It destroys my nerves. So funny enough, when I was interviewing with Amazon, I was sitting on another offer. It's an offer that I didn't want, and I didn't want to work for the company that I had the offer from. but I needed the job, and it was a very decent placeholder for me. And when I initially got called to be interviewed with Amazon, I honestly thought that, and I was telling this to my friends and family, that Alexa made a mistake, because I didn't think I was actually qualified, not just to do the job, but they sent me the list of the interviewers, and everyone in there was like a Wharton or INSEAD MBA, and here I come with God knows what degree, and experience. So I ended up, I think oddly enough, I ended up interviewing really well in terms of not being stressed and being in the zone, because I didn't care that much if I got the job or not. I'm not saying walk in there and just completely, talk from the back of your, rear end. But if you kind of need to almost like get into this mindset of a sports person, when you're training for a big result, obviously you need to want that result, but at the same time you need to be invested in the process and focus on the inputs as opposed to the outputs. And if you're focused on the inputs, making sure that you refresh your stories, learn the leadership principles, and then during the actual interview you just have to let the chips fall where they may. I think that will be the mental hack that might just help you do it. But again, these are just my tips that they've worked for me and they've worked for some other people, but they are by no means universal. And you're on mute again.
That damn peanut butter. All right, we are past the halfway mark, so shall we just quickly do our intermission and just ask a favor of you folks? So as you clearly see, folks, we put a massive amount into the YouTube channel. We put a massive amount into our blog that's on the Day One Careers website. We have an amazing free AI coach that is trained on all of the content on the YouTube on our community platform. A massive amount of effort goes into all of this free content that we give you folks. And we ask for nothing in return except for this one thing. And I promise you, it is the smallest, most insignificant thing. So I'm really hoping it's not too much of a challenge for you guys. Our request is that whenever you watch any piece of content from Day One Careers, that you either like that piece of content with the little thumbs up icon, or you put a little comment under the video. Doesn't matter what it is. What that does is it basically tells the YouTube algorithm that it's doing a good job. It has surfaced the content to someone who actually wants to watch the content, and that content itself is actually good content. What that then does is it prioritizes the Day One Careers content over other, we would argue, less high quality content that exists out there on YouTube. And you'll be doing other people in the same position as you looking for high quality, free, actionable content, and you'll be helping them out. So for the purposes of just practice, because we will have to practice, I'm going to ask you to spend the next couple of seconds, like half a second really, just giving us a little thumbs up on the back of this video. And oh, I've got me reactions going. That's exciting. Whilst we do that, we're just going to play you a little video, just for shits and shouldn't swear, just for somethings and giggles, as we would say here in the UK. If it is a little bit loud, this one, I'm sorry, folks. So if you have earphones on like me, you might just want to pop those earphones back a little bit on your ears whilst I play it, which I'm going to do now. But please, 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 tiny favor, just give us a little like. That's all we're asking from you. And I can, by the way, see how many likes there are on my other screen here. So I will know if you haven't done it. Just I don't know it's exactly you, but I will know that you haven't done it. All right, let's go, folks. Let's run VC, as they used to say in the old days.
Please like the stream now. Please like the stream now. Please like the stream now. Please like the stream. 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 Like the stream.
Right, sorry, I hope that didn't bust your eardrums, folks. I can see about half of you have taken some action. So the other half of you, if you're if you're on a jog, I forgive you, but I doubt half of you are off jogging right now. So please, if you haven't already, honestly, please just give us a little like. Hopefully it's not too much to ask. All right, do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Cool. Right. Let's see. How much does age play a role in TPM interviews, in your opinion? I know legally it should not, but realistically. I'll give you I guess a proper answer, and then I'll give you my perspective from some of the I guess experience coaching candidates and then tracking what happened to them. So practically or realistically, I don't know, and then no one will know. And we don't represent Amazon, we don't know. You're absolutely right. Like legally it shouldn't. And I can tell you that when it comes to policy and everything that Amazon stands for, to the bottom of its DNA, age should not play a role. That's basically it. How things will play out in reality, no one knows. I'm hoping that in 99.9999999% of situations, age will not play a role for, I guess, any roles where age isn't some sort of bona fide occupational qualification or has to do with strength and lifting boxes. I have no idea, right? But you see what I mean. That being said, your individual experience will be driven by your individual interviewers and interviewing team. And so we can't tell for sure. But I would tell you one thing. I would be incredibly surprised if your age will play a role, because I can just imagine from all of those debriefs that I have been a part of, if you make it to the loop, if someone mentions the age of the candidate, I mean, the explosion that would happen in that debrief and the shredding that the person who would mention that would be subjected to by the bar raiser. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be that person. I've never been that person. Also, from my experience coaching some of the candidates who, let's say, so I've just coached someone, not just some time ago, I've coached someone who was in their 50s and who successfully landed her an L6 senior program manager role. So I don't necessarily see why TPMs and senior program managers would be any different. So net, I'm hoping that age is not going to be a factor. But Gigi, do you have any experience that would suggest otherwise or provide more context to this?
No, I mean, you'd kick the arse of anybody that said anything like that in a debrief, for sure. I think the only way, in my experience, age has played a role in people getting jobs at Amazon is actually them self-selecting themselves out of even applying for Amazon in the first place. There is, and maybe to the point of your question, I think there's a perception out there that Amazon is only a place where young people can succeed and where young people want to work. It is true to say that you don't go to Amazon to put your feet up. Right? That's just not going to happen. But there are plenty of older candidates who are just as driven and enthusiastic and passionate about their work as the younger candidates. And it's, I think, that perception out there that is driving people who are in a later stage of their career to self-select themselves out of applying for Amazon. Because I have to be honest with you and say I don't think I've ever interviewed a 60-year-old applying for Amazon. I've definitely interviewed people in their early to mid 50s. Can't say I ever remember interviewing anyone from their late 50s and into their 60s. But I believe that's a self-selection issue rather than an Amazon issue. From Yevgeny's point of view, it's absolutely true. Policy-wise, everything Amazon stands for, it just would not be acceptable. So I don't see any reason why your age will play any role in anyone making a decision about you.
Also, I don't know, Gigi, if you've ever worked with folks like that, but I've worked with someone who joined Amazon in their, let's say, mid-30s as an L5, then at some point in time got promoted to an L6, and then stayed as an L6 for over 10 years and had no ambition to ever not be in L6, and just kept on being in L6. Did an excellent job. We worked together, and that, for me, that completely destroyed the myth that Amazon is this place where you come in young and you work for just a couple of years and you exit. Until I met this guy, and yeah, it was perfect, and he was very happy.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of really badly represented data studies out there that throw metrics and data points out about the average tenure of Amazonians that makes Amazon look like exactly as you've described, Yevgeny. But the minute you dig into those data points and actually try and understand what the data set they've used is, or their definition of average, it pretty much unravels really, really quickly. So if you're reading a report, anybody, that says the average tenure of an Amazonian is 2 years or something like that, I would be super skeptical, because the vast majority of people I worked with across my tenure at Amazon were there for more than 2 years. All right, I'm just going to pick this one then. Should I expect any LP related behavioral questions with the hiring manager for a social media content creator role in the very first phone screen? I'm applying for the North America team and he's head of global social media. Yes, I would absolutely expect you to get leadership principle behavioral questions in your first phone screen. Do you want me to pick another one, seeing as I copped out there?
Yeah, go for it.
Could you talk about the rubric that, I love that word, rubric, that the interviewer has? How do they decide if the guy, I'm sure you mean that in kind of the broadest sense of the term, as a collective noun rather than definitively male.
The human folk.
Yes, the folks are raising the bar. Yes, okay. I will try and do that relatively quickly. So essentially, for every single leadership principle, there is a representation of what good looks like and what bad looks like. So it literally describes the behaviors that would be considered good behaviors for these leadership principles, and there's usually about 4 or 5 of them. And it also describes the behaviors that would be bad for this leadership principle, and there's usually 4 or 5 of them on average, right? Don't go and count them if you're an Amazonian, right? So your interviewer will be, once they've left the interview with you and they're sitting down reviewing their notes, they will either be physically cross-referencing or using their embedded knowledge of what good and bad looks like for each of those individual leadership principles to assess the answers that you gave them. And it's there's no kind of counting, ooh, there's one there, and ooh, there's one there, and ooh, oh, there's a bad one there. There's no kind of mathematical equation about it. But what they'll be doing is they will be getting an overall sense of the answer that you gave them, and how much evidence they're getting of you behaving in line with the looks good or in line with the looks bad. Taking that kind of data on board, what they'll then do is essentially do a bit of a calibration. So the calibration exists on a 5-point scale from concern, some concern, neutral, some strength, and strength. And they basically plot you on that calibration, and that's where they believe that you are leveled at. Then what they do is, when they all get together in a room and they'll all agree and discuss these calibrations and kind of align on where they feel that you are from a calibration point of view, there's another dimension that's happening at exactly the same time, which is essentially this idea of raising the bar. So essentially, to define whether you think someone is raising the bar or not requires you to be working in the business at that point in time, and you'll be mentally cross-referencing the other people that you work with on a day-to-day basis who are in the same or similar roles at that same level. And you will be asking yourself, okay, can I imagine the lowest performer in my team doing what this person has just described to me, or achieving what this person has just described to me? If the answer is yes, I can imagine even the bottom person in my team doing that. That candidate is not raising the bar. So then they ask themselves, okay, can I see the person in the middle of my team being able to do what the candidate did? And if the answer there is yes, then you're kind of borderline. If the answer to the question, if they ask themselves, can I see really only the top people in my team being able to do what this person has just described to me? And the answer is yes, I think only the top people could have done it and everyone below could not have done it. Essentially, you are definitely raising the bar. So there's no, and I think people imagine that there is a very firm kind of mathematical equation to how you get to whether someone is or is not raising the bar. Unfortunately, it's not quite that empirical, and I don't think it ever really could be. There is a certain amount of I'll write a lot and high judgment that goes along with it. But that is essentially that. You're kind of thinking about these two dimensions at the same time. Is the person demonstrating more of the good looks like against each leadership principle? And then when you're thinking about them and mentally cross-referencing them to the other people that you work with, are they demonstrating behaviors that you think only the top half of any of those kind of reference people would do? That's it. That's the quick version anyway. Do you want to
Very
pick the next
extensive.
one, Evgeny?
I thought it was a very extensive
Oh,
version.
okay.
No, but I
I'd
love
hate to give
the
the long
detail.
version then.
Love the detail. Cool. Right. So next one. Are there defined questions associated with each leadership principle? For example, if they ask me, tell me about a time you failed, is there a specific LP they're looking for? So the answer to your first question is yes. There's this thing called Amazon Interview Question Bank, which is their internal question bank where you have questions linked to leadership principles, but we don't have it. We left it when we left Amazon. But yeah, it's out there. If you search for it, you'll find some information. It isn't an Amazon specific only thing. Plenty of other companies who have structured interviewing, like Amazon does, they've got standardized questions, and structured interviewing helps companies evaluate and learn and improve their interviewing process to make sure it's more, I guess, predictive of how candidates will do in actual jobs. Your second question is, for example, if they ask me, tell me about your time you failed, is there a specific LP that they're looking for? So normally questions will be linked to LPs. This particular question doesn't link to any LPs because it's not really testing for any leadership principles whatsoever. And plenty of candidates come to us and asking us, well, how do we answer the failure question? There is no such thing as the failure question. There are some questions that are testing what we call the negative ways into leadership principles, because leadership principles are competencies, and sometimes to demonstrate a competency, you can do it from a negative way in, but Amazon will never ask you this specific question, tell me about a time when you failed, because it doesn't really test any of the Amazon's competencies. Anything you'd add, Gigi?
No. Well, it doesn't test any of them, and it tests all of them. That's the problem with that question. You could go in any direction, couldn't you? Which is why it's a bad question. Okay. So I'm going to just quickly deal with this one with Patricia so she doesn't think we're ignoring her. You're asking us, have we any idea what LPs will come up on the returner program? No, sorry, Patricia. No, we need job descriptions. Okay, let me pick this one. Okay. This is a two-parter. So how long does it take for a team to match at AWS? Recruiter says there are no roles available and you've received an offer 3 months ago, which you turned down for medical reasons. Have you been messaging me on the YouTube channel? I feel I had a question about this on the YouTube channel quite recently. And you're worried because the 6 months might be up soon. Recruiter said both LP and tech are both very good. So I think you're talking about your performance interview. And she said you could get a mini loop for similar other roles. Will your previous offer had a good impression on the interviewers? Okay, so I cannot answer you how long it will take for a team match in AWS, because that is a how long is a piece of string question. Who knows? There are many, many different teams, and there are many, many different lengths, and there's no average. It's just going to be a function of when roles come up. So I'm afraid I can't answer that. Is it possible that your offer will expire before a role comes up? I'm afraid it is possible. If a role does come up in the next 3 months, then yes, obviously the fact that you already have an open offer and you only need to go through a mini loop is definitely going to be a key card in your favor. if the offer expires and you have to go through the process again from the very beginning, the fact that you already had an outstanding offer that you didn't take up is still going to play in your favor. When recruiters are digging through the ATS looking for potential candidates, or when candidates have made applications and the recruiters pick their profile up from the ATS, they will see that you were actually given an offer. And that will obviously mean that you are probably the strongest possible candidate, or in the bucket of the strongest possible candidates that they could hope for to fill the role that they're looking for if your profile matches. So although I'm sorry I didn't give you probably the answer that you were hoping to get, at least that gives you some sense of the advantages that you have as someone who did at some point get an offer. Do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Yes. So, just got out of the interview with the hiring manager for a sales role. Will they share notes to the Loop team before or after all interviews? Just don't want to misspeak a number over multiple convos. Right. I guess my answer to your first question is, will they be sharing their notes with the Loop team? So they will hopefully they will enter their notes into the system, and when they progress you to the Loop, in case the notes from your phone screen need to be accessed at any point in time, I believe, and Gigi, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's only the hiring manager and the bar raiser would have access to those, and only if they must, because normally that's not what happens, right? Like I maybe had one Loop when I had to go down to look at phone screen notes, but usually not. But then what's confusing me is this extra context. Just don't want to misspeak a number over multiple conversations. I'm not entirely sure what you meant. Gigi, do you know?
I think I'm following. So what happens is when somebody interviews you, they then go away, write up their notes, and make their decision as to their initial view of whether they would be inclined or not inclined. They put that into the system. No one else can see that unless they have already put their notes into the system and expressed their inclined or not inclined initial view. That's to avoid bias. You cannot see the notes of anybody who has previously interviewed the candidate to you or previously submitted their view on the candidate when you have not already done yours. So what will happen is the notes will become increasingly available to the broader group as more and more of the broader group interview you and then put in their notes. By the time debrief comes around, everybody will have put in their initial vote, which means everyone will then be exposed to everybody else's notes. So if you're concerned about misspeaking the same number over multiple conversations, you should be concerned about that, because even though the subsequent interviewer will not know that you used that number in a previous interview because they will not yet have seen those notes, eventually they will see those notes. And at that point, any inconsistencies between your stories will surface. And trust me, folks, on this, they will spot them. There are many, many times in debriefs, both ones that I ran as a bar raiser and ones I attended as an interviewer, I would have done both. We could spot inconsistencies in people's stories. And sometimes it was very clear that people were just making stuff up. So do not be inconsistent. If you have to write the data points down so that you are consistent, that's fine. Do that. It is certainly better than a debrief coming along and everyone being suspicious about the authenticity of the information that you shared. Okay, do you want to pick the next one? What time are we at? Oh, we've got 1 minute left. So do you want to pick the last one and then we'll do the freebies?
Yeah, sure. Okay. How do you translate a question like, tell me an instance where you faced numerous setbacks into an LP? I mean, if you must translate it, or any question like that, you need to really learn what those LPs actually mean. Like, what are the facets of those LPs? If you're using external sources and Amazon's own sources, study all of their websites, go to About Amazon, go to Amazon.jobs, listen to Andy Jassy talking about them, and then you will understand. You will begin to develop an intuitive feel of what those leadership principles, those competencies might contain. Obviously, in our paid resources, we've done the chewing for you, and we've entirely, completely laid out what facets, what behavioral facets every leadership principle has. This one in particular is asking you for a situation where essentially you had to put a superhero cape on and rise above the rubble of the circumstances that life has dealt you. So I would imagine it's probably deliver results. I don't remember a question being asked in this particular form, but if I was asked a question like this, I would assume it's deliver results. But when you answer a question in the interview, actually trying to connect it to leadership principle is counterproductive. So I wouldn't do that. Anything you'd add, Gigi?
No, you're right. This is definitely a deliver results. And to me, this is an articulation, a different way of expressing a question that's in the AIQB, which is essentially tell me about a time where you faced, a number of unexpected obstacles to achieving a key role, a key project or something like that, key goal. So it's just a different way of asking that question. But to Yevgeny's point, when you're in the actual interview, just answer the question. Sounds stupid, but just answer the question. The interview is not the time to be connecting back to the leadership principles. The leadership principles and thinking about leadership principles is you're meant to do that in your preparation. So if you have understood the leadership principles well and created enough range of stories to create stories and situations that cover the multiple different facets of the leadership principles and have them in your head, in your mental bank, then when you go into the interview, shouldn't be thinking about the leadership principles, you should be thinking about the question, because questions are always connected to leadership principles. So whatever you've understood the leadership principle to be, the question should also connect to that. And you should be able to go, oh yes, I have stop wagging my hands around. Oh yes, I remember. Oh yes, I definitely have a story in my head about when I had a whole bunch of problems in being able to deliver a project. And you just tell that story. What you don't do is go, what leadership principle are they asking me? Oh, I think this leadership principle is ownership. Right. What's my ownership story? This is my ownership story. Bleh. Because chances are you haven't answered the question, because actually you've probably misidentified the leadership principle. So the time for thinking about leadership principles is in your preparation. The time for answering the question is in your interview. All right, so folks, we are going to give you our freebies. So if you follow this link down here, Yevgeny, you're on the other side of that. Do your finger. Do the pokey pokey. That's it. At the end of this link, you will find, and I'll rattle through this really quickly, folks, so don't all run off thinking I'll be babbling for hours. I promise I won't be. 3 things at the end of this link. The first thing we're going to give you is a free little taster course that is a little bit part of our broader paid Amazon interview success system. This focuses on customer obsession. What it does is it breaks down the different facets of customer obsession. We were talking about facets a minute ago. That's a creation of Day One Careers, by the way. It's not an Amazon term, but there are different ways of going into each leadership principle. We call them facets. Customer obsession has 4. It will also then tell you what the interviewer is really looking for in your customer obsession answer, so you can really understand what you should be saying in your interview answer for a customer obsession question, if you're answering the question. And the third thing in that little pack is a mock interview, me interviewing me, just to give you a feel for what it might look like in the actual interview itself. Second thing that is at the end of that, and everyone should go and get this without question, is what we call the plausible Amazon interview question bank. It is not the actual Amazon interview question bank. It is a bank of questions that we have created based on our expert and very deep understanding of the leadership principles that are plausible questions. We don't suggest you try and create stories directly against those questions, and we would give that advice to you of, quite frankly, any questions you found anywhere on the web. But it is a good tool to help you practice. How would I answer this question if I was asked it in the interview? Third thing that you then get, if you take out either of those 2 things, is access to our amazing Heartbeat community, where we have well over 4,000 people registered who either have interviewed at Amazon in the past or are currently going through Amazon interviewing at the moment, you can find some buddies, meet up with people, do mock interviews between you, and that will also give you access to our AI coach, which is trained on the YouTube channel. So any content that's on the YouTube channel, Andy, our AI coach, now knows about. So if you can't be bothered to trawl through all of the beautifully crafted an hour's worth of work that I put into those YouTube videos, if you can't be bothered to look at those, you can just go and ask Andy and he'll answer the question for you. All right, so I think that's it, Yevgeny.
That's
so fingers crossed for all of you folks who have interviews coming up this week. We hope it all works out for you. As I already asked, if you are on the YouTube channel, please just take an extra fraction of a second and just give it a like, give it a thumbs up, write a little comment. Hey, Gigi, how you doing? Is it sunny where you are? Whatever. But it'd be amazing if you could just help us boost that content on the YouTube channel in return for our gift to you. All right. I'll let everyone go and hopefully we will see you next week.
See you next week, and good luck for everyone who is interviewing. Smash it.
See you, Evgeny. Have a great night.
See you. Bye.
Bye.